30th, names on the wall. Here was a royal fellowship of death. King Henry V. Act 4, Scene 8. It was October 22nd. Wayne Hill could see through his office window that the autumn afternoon outside was bright, golden and crisp, a perfect Northwest Independence Day. It was now 15 years since the bloody morning in Coeur d'Alene, when outraged white men had finally arisen in arms to strike at the bloody claw of Zion that sought the lives of their children. It had been 10 years since the tricolor had gone up over the Longview Conference, and the Northwest Republic had proclaimed its independence. Hill still couldn't quite grasp in his own mind the fantastic changes that had taken place in the Homeland since the Revolution. Wherever he went now, he looked out over a clean, peaceful, and prosperous world that had overcome every obstacle to establish a society that was stable, just, compassionate, safe, and fearless, a nation strong with faith in the destiny of this land and her people. Despite the sanctions and shortages of the early years, despite the monotonous threats of war and invasion from the rest of the world, despite the constant bombardment of screaming hatred from the media, and the politicians from what remained of the world's Judaic liberal democracies, despite all the problems, every year white people came home to the Northwest by the hundreds of thousands. They ran the barbed wire and the minefields in Aslan, Canada, and the United States. They dodged the helicopters in the chute to kill patrols. They snuck in via the cargo holds of blockade-running ships and planes. They used every conceivable subterfuge somehow to bring themselves and their families to this land where their present and their future had been won and secured by the sword, and where they were willing to die if need be to live among their own, and only among their own. The oak-paneled office where Wayne Hill now sat at a desk of polished Northwest oak, a fire crackling in an open hearth, was in the city of Olympia, just across the street from the legislative building that housed Parliament, a structure which with delicious irony had been modeled after the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. It was there that the first national convention had met in the days after Longview. Hill himself was now the director of the Bureau of State Security, or BOSS as it was known. Mostly he and his men wore civilian clothes on duty, but on this Independence Day, he was wearing the BOSS formal uniform that inspired both dread and respect within the homeland and around the world. The simple boots and tunic and cap of an NDF private without a single insignia, badge of rank, or decoration, except for the War of Independence medal that all veterans of that heroic time wore. Hill and his department were largely responsible for the prosperity, the stability, and the safety that the people of the NAR now enjoyed. The Americans and world Jewry had spent the last 10 years plotting against the life of the infant nation. It was like living in a fine house with a den of cobras nesting in the basement. But every time the Judaic serpent had reared to strike, Hill and his boss agents, and 100 other strong white arms from every service and every walk of life crushed the reptile's head. Until the next time. Remember, Hill always told his new agents, the Jews are still immensely richer than us. Their slaves are more numerous than we are, their resources more vast than ours, and they are still far more powerful than we are. They can afford mistakes. We can't. Zog only has to win once. We have to win every time. There was a knock on Hill's door. "Come in," he said. The door opened and Special Service General William Jackson walked in, wearing full black dress uniform with silver piping, swastika armband, peaked cap and dagger. He had a paper file folder under his arm. "Hey, Billy, I see you're all dolled up for your speech," said Hill. "Yeah, I have to go in a few minutes," said Jackson. "NBA is broadcasting it on the government channel." "And what's your competition?" asked Hill with a smile. "A 1,950 seconds Western on Channel 4 and cartoons on the Children's Channel." "Actually, Channel 4 is showing Braveheart, like they always do on Independence Day. And some of these new cartoons are actually pretty good," said Jackson. "You've seen Cappy the Kike?" "Yeah, I've seen that one." "It's cute," agreed Hill. "You know it's a straight rip-off of the old Roadrunner cartoons? Cappy is constantly trying to steal somebody's money or gold or jewels, and he's always getting blown up, or impaled, or fed to alligators, or pushed off cliffs and otherwise mangled by Deputy Dog and his animal friends. The little kids love it. Our satellites and internet stations are broadcasting it the world over, and every week somebody in the U.S. Congress screams bloody murder. "Look, there's something I wanted to see you about," said Jackson seriously. "I was going to put it off until after the holiday, but, well, I kind of wanted to just get it over with." This is a great day, 10 years on since Longview, and I didn't want to have to think about this while I'm speechifying about how great a day it is. That sounds pretty grim, said Hill with a frown. What is it? Jackson took a deep breath. You remember back all those years ago when you were 3-6 man in Portland, around the second year or so of the war, when you vowed and swore on a stack of Mein Kampfs that there was a spy somewhere in 1st Brigade, and we all thought you were full of sheep dip? I still maintain I was right. The pattern was there, said Hill. Well, actually it turns out you were right, said Jackson with a embarrassed sigh. As you may recall, when we finally got hold of Portland, we went through what was left of the records of the various secret police agencies operating in the city, almost all of which were on computer drives. We didn't find too much. They had ample time to destroy or remove most of it. Plus a lot of their drives and backups got busted up in the shelling and shooting, so forth and so on. As a matter of routine, we also confiscated and inventoried the contents of all the private safe deposit boxes in the Portland banks. All of this was pretty rushed. Since we had 11 different other things we had to do, we didn't know if the enemy was going to counterattack. Hell, you remember how it was? I remember, nodded Hill. One of the safe deposit boxes we glommed was rented by one Elena Martinez, a detective lieutenant in the old Portland Police Bureau. You remember a spook and spick team in the hate crimes unit called the Mommy and the Monkey? Oh yes, said Hill. Well, for whatever reason, probably blackmail or ass covering of some kind, the Martinez woman seems to have run off a hard copy of a whole snitch file on the police printer, according to the tagline and date on the pages here, then absconded with the file and stashed it in a safe deposit box, said Jackson. After things settled down, the party eventually got around to assigning clerical teams to go over the mass of documents captured during the War of Independence, including the contents of all the Portland safe deposit boxes we'd appropriated. But as you know, we were always terribly short-handed. There was always higher priority stuff to do, and somehow I have no clue how this one folder kept finding its way to the bottom of the pile, and then getting lost or misfiled or God knows what. For 10 years? Asked Hill incredulously. For 10 years. I guess bureaucracy is one Zionist curse we still haven't fully eliminated yet. Maybe it was looked over by some little girl from the labor service with her mind on her boyfriend, or some guy thinking about what was for lunch or something, or it just didn't register, and whoever it was simply didn't realize what they were holding in their hands. Whatever the story is, 2 days ago one of the permanent staff cleaning out the last of the backlog finally opened this file and read the damned thing, understood its historical relevance, and since I was the most senior party member in the building at the time, she brought it right upstairs to my attention, which I'm glad she did. At least that way I was able to keep it out of regular channels for a bit, until you decide how you want to handle it. Jackson sighed again. How bad is it? Asked Hill gently. Pretty bad. I always liked her and admired her. Thank God she's dead. Who is it, Bill? Who was it, I should say? Jackson threw the file down on Hill's desk. Kiki McGee, he said, almost weeping. Kiki fucking McGee. Damn, cursed Hill softly. You can write me down an ass on this one, Bill, as Constable Dogberry would say. I never suspected her once. Hell, I was the one who approved bringing her in, after she mysteriously showed up at an important meeting one night instead of the contact who should have been there, who subsequently turned out to be conveniently dead at the hands of the cops. God, what was I thinking? My brain must have been swinging through the trees that night. Did she rat out the crew and set up the ambush on Flanders Street when we went after the vice president? That's not clear from the file, said Jackson. It stops abruptly after that event. No further comments, nothing to indicate any further contact, zip. But hold on, this doesn't make sense, said Hill. You remember that Kiki McGee was on Task Force Director's Cut? She went on the team with me and Charlie Randall and Kat Lockhart down to Hollywood. In fact, she was one of the triggers in the Kodak Theater on Oscar night. And she was with us all through Operation We Are Not Amused. If she was an informer, why the hell didn't she blow the whistle on that operation, take all of us out, and save Hollywood for the Kosher Nostra? She knew about Erica Collingwood, for Christ's sake, but Erica wasn't burned for months afterward, until that Kaike Schulman got onto her tail. If she was ratting us out, there's no way the feds wouldn't have gotten most or all of us. You know what I think, Oscar? Jackson had unconsciously lapsed back into the old NVA lingo. I think they must have pressured her into doing it, but it looks like she broke with them. You know the Wingos adopted her daughter after the war? The little girl was on the run with her grandmother for a long time before that, and I remember Kiki talking about the child sometimes. But now that I think about it, she always kind of avoided the subject if she could. There may have been a coercion situation there. The file does stop after Flanders Street. Can we talk to the grandmother? Asked Hill. She died last year. Look, Oscar, you know I would be the last to defend a traitor and an informer, and according to that file she was responsible for some bad damage and some volunteer deaths. That's unforgivable. But I was this woman's commanding officer, and I feel obligated to point out that at the same time she was doing good service for the army, and that she died heroically in the line of duty, taking a couple of particularly nasty enemy agents with her. The same Zog operatives who were running her as an informant, according to this, said Hill, riffling through the file. Yeah, agreed Jackson. God knows how that came about. I was there, remember? Hill reminded him. We always figured the mommy or the monkey grabbed her briefcase from her once they pulled her into the car and tried to open it. But maybe Kiki knew the jig was up and she blew that bomb herself as an act of atonement or apology. We'll never know. If that's a possibility, then she deserves the benefit of the doubt, urged Jackson. We can't know what happened that day, but I do know it will damn near kill Jimmy and Levon Wingo if this comes out, as well as saddle the daughter with a burden of guilt she doesn't deserve. There's one other thing you need to know, Oscar. The Portland cops opened one of those secret snitch accounts for her when she first started informing, paid her electronically every week from a police slush fund, and toward the end she was racking up a pretty impressive buck. I checked with the National Credit Union, who took over all the old American banking assets, including the old Bank of America accounts, and the account is still there. It's not drawing interest because that's illegal now, but the principal is still there. And the NCU's records show that the account was never drawn on from the time the account was started. Kiki never touched a penny of that money, not once. That must mean something. So you're saying, prompted Hill. That file was lost for 10 years, Wayne. I can't see any reason why it shouldn't get lost again. Permanently, you can talk about truth being our duty to history and all that, but how can it be right, and just to open an old wound that nobody even knew was there, and dig up the dead when it will do nothing but cause pain to the living? Her name is on the wall down on the green a few hundred yards from here. Is it really our duty to go down there and scratch it off, today of all days? Bet that'll be a hell of a speech you make tonight, said Hill mildly. He closed the file. Leave this with me, Bill. I'll look it over to see if there is anything in here that might even remotely impact anything going on today, or which requires that I or my organization take any action. I doubt it, since everyone concerned seems to be dead. If not, then I think I've got a memory hole stashed around here somewhere. Oh, and I think we can arrange to discover that bank account in some innocuous way and make sure the daughter gets the money. She deserves it, since one way or another, the poisonous and evil regime that paid it killed her mother and her father both, and destroyed her childhood. Go on and tell the folks who are waiting for you what a great day this is, Bill. Don't worry, you'll be telling the truth. Thank you, sir, said Jackson. How's Christina and the kids? Fine, as always. Come over for dinner sometime soon. We'll talk about the old days. The good old days, agreed Hill. After Jackson left the office, Hill picked up the file in his hand and walked over to the hearth, where the logs had burned down low. He stirred them up with a poker. He carefully read each page, then he crumpled it and tossed it into the fireplace, where each ball of paper caught and flared and burned into ash. The last papers to go before the folder itself were Kiki's old mugshots from her days as a drug-addicted prostitute under the old order in the old world, now long past. They burst into bright flame and curled and folded into glowing ash. Rest in peace, comrade, said Hill into the silent room around him. Down on the wide green swath of the Capitol Mall, a number of veterans from the newly formed NVA Old Fighters Association had gathered for the Independence Day holiday. The memorial wall stood before them in massive black basalt, bearing the inscribed names of all the NVA and NDF personnel who had given their lives during the War of Independence. It had only been unveiled a few months before. A large tricolor flag of blue, white, and green flew over it, on a stone pillar bearing the seal of the Northwest Volunteer Army. Along the base of the monument, chiseled into the finest Italian marble, were the words "Beloved kinsmen, from the world of darkness into which we were born, from the time of struggle in which we laid down our lives that you and your children may walk in the light, we greet you." Many people were taking sheets of white paper and stubby soft lead pencils from a small kiosk off to one side of the monument. They mounted the steps and walked along the long row of alphabetically listed names, finding and tracing onto the paper in graphite the names of former comrades. Many of them were quietly weeping, men and women alike. In front of the monument, dozens of children were running around on the grass, playing and screaming and hollering, mostly oblivious to the solemn adults around them. No one tried to hush them or shoo them off. It was for them that the people on the monument had died after all. A small girl about 4 years of age marched up to her mother on the grass and tugged on her hand. "What is it now, honey?" asked Annette Sellers. The child looked up and announced in a solemn voice, "Jesse Hatfield ate a bug. Janet told him to. Jimmy Wingo jumped off that man," she added, pointing to a nearby statue. "Janet told him to. Jimmy Jr., stop climbing on that statue," yelled Levon Wingo at her son. "It's got nasty stuff from pigeons on it." Eric Sellers picked up his little girl. "We need to get you out of this tattletale phase you're in, young lady," he said sternly to her, beeping her nose. "Nobody likes a rat." "Why?" asked the little girl. "Because rats have long, horrible gray noses and nasty-ass whiskers," her father explained. "Do you want to walk around with a long, horrible gray nose and nasty-ass whiskers?" The little girl thought for a bit, then shook her head. "No," she said decisively. "I didn't think you did." Annette Sellers looked over at her oldest daughter, Janet, named after her younger sister who had died. She was an angelic blonde creature, with a ribbon in her hair, standing primly aloof, while a number of boys cavorted and wrestled each other to the ground around her, trying to get her attention. Annette shook her head in exasperation. "Honestly, what are we going to do? With that child? She's only 8 years old, and already she seems to be making a career out of manipulating boys to do all kinds of dumb things." "I wonder where she gets that from," said Eric with a sidelong look at his wife. "I think Jesse would try to catch a moose and ride it if Heather asked him to," said Julia Hatfield. "She does have such a lovely smile, though." "Can we go see the puppies and go on the swings now, Daddy?" asked the little girl in Eric's arms. "There's a playground and a small petting zoo at the hotel, and her mind's been on it all day," Annette explained to Levon Wingo and Julia Hatfield. "We brought them here to try and teach them about their heritage. But I'm afraid at their age the revolution can't compete with a litter of collie pups," said Eric with a sigh. "They're kids," said Zach Hatfield. "They'll learn in time. Right now they can just enjoy being children, thanks to what we did back then. That's something we never had. One more victory we've ripped away from the kikes." Jimmy Wingo Sr. was standing off to one side, dressed in a neat suit and tie. A slender and pretty teenage girl in a blue skirt, white blouse and sweater stood beside him. Wingo beckoned to his wife, and she came over to them. "You know why we brought you here today, Ellie?" her stepfather asked gently. "I know," she said. "You all right with it?" asked Wingo. "Sure," said the girl with a smile. "Don't worry, it's not some big revelation. You guys never hid anything from me. I always knew I was adopted, and my father died in Iraq, and my mom was killed during the war here." They walked up onto the platform in front of the monument wall, and they strolled down the list of names, every now and then stopping to hold one of the pieces of paper against the wall and etch in a familiar name from the past. Finally, they found the name they were looking for, McGee, Vol, Kristen A., it said, and then the date in January when she died. Mary Ellen quietly took the paper and pencil, held it up against the wall and etched her mother's name onto it, then folded it up and put it in her pocketbook. "You've never asked about her much before, honey," said Wingo. "Do you remember anything at all? You were very young." "About my mother, no," said Mary Ellen, shaking her head. "I remember living in a lot of places with Grandma, and I remember coming to realize that there were bad men after us, and that was why we always had to hide. But not my mother so much. I was really young the last time we saw each other, not even 2. Grandma never talked about her much. I know Kristen was, well, she had a pretty hard time. That's probably why she joined the revolution. Grandma never talked much about those times, the times before, but I know enough from history class at school, so I think I can guess some of it. I don't think Grandma blamed Kristen or hated her, I think it just hurt so much she didn't want to burden me with it." She was silent for a bit. "I remember love, mine and hers. I've always remembered loving my mother and my mother loving me. Of all the things you could have kept, that's the best," said Levon. "You know Vonnie and I both knew her," said Wingo. "Jim knew her better than me," said Levon, without jealousy or bitterness. "But we both remember her. We came here with some others, the Sellers and the Hatfields, and we'll be meeting the Randalls later tonight for dinner. They remember your mother, too, and so do General Jackson and General Hill, if you ever get a chance to meet them, plus a lot of others. This is a part of your past that you need to know about, honey, before you move on with the rest of your life. Now is the time to ask, because 10 years ago today, your mother and the rest of us gave you that life, which we hope will turn out to be happy, wonderful, and fulfilling. If it is, it will be the life you two gave me," said Mary Ellen seriously. "You know you two are my real father and mother." "We've tried to be," said Jimmy, "out of love for you and out obligation to your mother. Honey, you need to know Kiki so you can come to know yourself better. I think you already know that your mother was a brave and noble woman who lived in a bad time in history, but she never gave up on you, or on life. Most people back then just surrendered to the badness of it all. She never did. I'm sure you know that because you can feel that part of her in you, but I think it's time you knew some of the details, and we can fill those in." As the three of them walked down the steps of the memorial to their waiting friends and family, behind them the slowly setting sun illuminated the seal of the Northwest Volunteer Army engraved on the marble pillar that served as the flagpole for the tricolor. The words on the seal seemed to glow with light and with life. Ex gladio libertas. Freedom comes from the sword,